Good morning once again. I'm Steve Fields with SC Biz News, the publisher of the Charleston Regional Business Journal, the Columbia Regional Business Report, GSA Business, and SC Biz Magazine. And I'd like to welcome you to our fifth Power Breakfast event of the year. Okay, to facilitate our panel discussion and moderate the Q&A portion of this morning's event, I'd like to introduce our group publisher, Mr. Grady Johnson.
Morning, everyone. The way this works, if you haven't been here before, is we're going to do this predominantly as a Q&A format. I'm going to walk around with the microphone for two reasons. One, because I've had coffee and it makes me hyper. And secondly, I don't want to stand in front of anybody, so I'm just going to kind of rove around. We're going to have a microphone in my hand. Steve's going to have another microphone. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll fit you in as best we can. Because this report just came out, we wanted to set the stage a little bit. I'm not going to do any introductions on for the panel. That's in the programming materials, and most of you know these guys anyway. So I'm just going to jump right in. I'm going to get Steve and Mary to come up. They've got a few slides to kind of kick this thing off, to kind of give us sort of a base level, some important points that they wanted to present to us, and then we'll get right into Q&A. So take it away.
Thanks, Grady. Can everybody hear me, or is that good? Good morning. Everybody loves data, right? It's early. All right, so here's the thing. This is the fourth year we've done this. Hopefully a lot of you have already seen this before. As Grady said, we're going to give you a quick overview. Mary and I are just going to hit the high points and go into this. The reason we do this is to provide unbiased data for our community leaders so that we can have a hard look at how we're really doing in a competitive context. So we look at that, not just how we're doing versus our year, the year before, but how are we doing in a competitive context. And to do that, we look at 6 southeastern metro areas that have similar assets and similar size. And we also look at 2 leading communities of Austin, Texas, and Raleigh, North Carolina. If any of you have ever been around any of CRDA meetings, we talk about those communities a lot, and we do because those economies are top 5 performing economies year in and year out. And we want to look at those and say, what can we learn from them? So we do a lot of best practice work around that. So again, unbiased data, hard-nosed look. And we don't do this alone. So we always use that academic partner. This year we were fortunate to have our academic partners as the Low Country Graduate Center and the Riley Center for Livable Communities at the College of Charleston. So we appreciate them doing the data collection, data analysis, and helping us with that. The Metro Chambers Center for Business Research, which has been a partner from day one, and really Mary and Jackie and her team that help us take that data and interpret it. The design and publishing of this is done by SC Biz, and Grady, your team does a great job in helping us take this data and turning it into something digestible and easy to understand. Special shout out to Ryan Wilcox, who's the guy that takes all this stuff and puts it into icons and graphics and makes it something that people that aren't data geeks like me and Mary and Kendra and Godfrey can actually work with. And finally, a 14-member community task force led by Matt Sloan of the Daniel Island Company. If you look at the back of your report, all those people are listed, but we really appreciate all their help, all their support, and really helping us get the word out about this data. So again, we're not going to go through every dashboard and every piece of data, but we're going to hit you some highlights for you and go from there and look at some key takeaways. And then Mary's going to talk about some of the challenges that we have that we see coming down the road. So first, the results. We got a lot of good news, people, so it's a good day to look at this. One quick note, we benchmarked this data back to 2005, so this is not year-over-year changes. This is looking at us back to a 2005 year baseline and what's the trend on that. So first, GRP growth, gross regional product. We have grown significantly. We've outpaced the U.S. by almost 7 points, and we've outpaced all the comparative metros that you see in that report. So this is really, really strong. That means our economy is growing, more money's flowing into the economy, and that's a good thing. And as you can see in many places in the report, we don't outpace Austin and Raleigh. They have a significant lead on us in this, and they always do year in and year out, so they're really strong. Second data we looked at was earnings per worker growth. This one is one that's really exciting to look at. Again, back to that 2005 base, 21.5% growth compared to U.S. growth of 0.1%. So that is really strong, and we did very well in that, including outpacing all the metros surveyed, with the exception of Savannah, and that's kind of an anomaly, and we'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. And the good news within that is that earnings growth, we think, points to the rapid addition of manufacturing, information technology, and finance-related jobs, high-paying, high-skilled, high-wage jobs, that is that growth. All right, next slide. Regional employment growth, another exciting slide. We are at 11.5% growth for the region versus a 0.5% U.S. average. This is one where we doubled and tripled those comparative metros that we look at, and was significantly higher than the U.S. average. Once again, we fell short of Austin and Raleigh's growth, but we went back and looked at the data, and we are closing the gap slightly on those, so we're making some progress. And then last but not least, some pretty exciting news. And this data for export growth is actually 2010 to 2012. So in that time period, we grew 32.7% to $3.9 billion as impact to our GRP. So this is exports. It's not container volume through the port. It is goods and services sold that bring foreign dollars into our community. And that can include everything from education and tourism to things like big airplanes made out in North Charleston. And so that's a lot of that growth, but it also includes things like software licensing. So, all right, so that's the results. Real quickly, the competitiveness inputs, the dashboards. Again, we're not going to go through all of them, but we look at 4 areas. Human capital, innovative activity, entrepreneurial environment, and quality of place. All of those showed positive trends. So again, looking at these dashboards, you see that green dial moving. That means we're going in the right direction. All of them positive. Human capital, pretty much at the U.S. average. We've got some challenges there. Innovative activity is the only dashboard where we're significantly below the U.S. average, and that's a challenge area. Entrepreneurial environment, that's probably our strongest improvement with a 10-point change since 2005. We actually passed Raleigh slightly on that one, and we're edging up on Austin, so that's something to celebrate. And then finally, in quality of place, we improved 8 points, but we're essentially middle of the pack. And we're starting to face some challenges there, particularly in the areas of travel congestion and housing affordability. And I'm going to step away and let Mary talk about those.
Thanks, Steve. Just to put it all into context, the economic performance is unbelievable for our region. And just yesterday, Brookings released some new numbers looking at metros across the country, and we're now in the top 10 in the country in terms of GDP growth since the recession began. So phenomenal growth taking place. And as David likes to point out to us, we're there. We have achieved that economic growth that we want to as a community, and now the challenge is how do we sustain it? And I'm going to talk about some of the challenges we have ahead that are pointed out in the report. So first off, travel congestion. Our economy is doing great, and as a result, we've got lots of people that want to live here now. So our traffic congestion is not getting better, it's getting worse. Between 2005 and 2011, total cost of congestion for commuters in our region increased almost 25%. And overall cost is estimated at $240 million. 30 hours of delay, but just by sitting in traffic every day in our community as we sit around and know that we don't have enough infrastructure to support our community today, let alone the growth that's coming. Our population is growing at 3 times the national average today. And at the current rate, the Center for Business Research estimates we'll be at over 1 million people in our metro region within 15 years. That's not a small southern community any longer. That's a major metropolitan area, and we've got to do something to handle the additional traffic and congestion that's coming. And while average wages in the region are doing great, and that's something we definitely need to celebrate, we also have an issue of housing affordability in our community. Well-educated, high-skilled talent is the #1 issue facing companies today in our region. As we go around the region and talk to major employers, that's their #1 concern. Where's my workforce coming, and how am I going to keep those folks here in the long term? But our region's high cost of living and our average wages that remain below the national average make us one of the least affordable metros in the Southeast. And if workers can't afford to live near their jobs, the results are longer commute times, more congestion, and increased community cost and sprawl. So right now, our region is doing very well, and we have all the ingredients and the potential to become a world-class, globally competitive community like Raleigh and Austin. We've talked about the fact that we're comparing ourselves to peer communities, and they're no longer our peers. We are becoming more like Raleigh and Austin, but to maintain that success, we've got 4 critical issues we have to address as a region. Number 1 is transportation. The South Carolina Department of Transportation estimates that there's more than $1.5 billion annual infrastructure need in our state. And last year, our legislature allocated $591 million towards infrastructure improvements. That's a big gap between $500 million and $1.5 billion. And the legislature must provide more funding, and we've got to get more innovative locally about how we're going to fund transportation needs. Education, continued funding for career development. We've got to transform our education outcomes at every level. And just one example is in higher education. Our state has continued to cut funding to our public colleges and universities. They've reduced statewide funding for public higher education by 24% over the last few years. That's the wrong direction. We've got to persuade our elected officials that education is an investment, it's not an expense. And we've got to do more in transforming the outcomes at every level. Innovation. An innovative economy is one that grows and thrives. That's what Raleigh and Austin have that we don't. A much more innovative environment to operate in and produce the kinds of businesses that we want to grow in our community. And that, again, means we need to invest in higher education and have the degree programs this community does not have today in engineering, computer, and IT. Those are the degrees that we have the largest gap, and those are the ones we need to fill. And finally, overall talent. Again, it's the number 1 issue for employers as we talk to them, and we've got to address the immediate gaps and long-term issues such as housing affordability and traffic congestion in order to attract and retain the needed talent to make our business community thrive.